Spotting the signs of meningitis early could save your life. So what is the infection and how do you know if someone's got it? So meningitis is an inflammation of the fluids around the brain, the lining of the brain, and it's also can lead to blood poisoning, which is known as sepsis. So meningitis is spread by little droplets being coughed or sneezed into the air, and you can breathe those in. But you can also get it from, for example, sharing a drink or kissing or even sharing a vape. Now, the problem is that around 10% of people have the virus or the bacteria lurking in the back of their throats or the back of their noses, and they don't know it because they're absolutely fine. So the symptoms are things like a high fever. You can be sick. You can have a headache. Sometimes, but not always, you can get a rash that doesn't disappear when you roll, for example, a roll of glass over it. You can get stiff neck, cold hands and feet. You can dislike bright lights, be really sensitive to them, and you can get drowsiness or be unresponsive, and you can even get seizures. Now, the problem is that many of those symptoms can be mistaken at the beginning for a cold or a flu or even a hangover. So there's viral meningitis and there's bacterial meningitis. Now, viral meningitis, people can often get well on their own without any major treatment. Bacterial meningitis, though, is much more serious, and that's the one that can affect the fluids and the lining of the brain and the spine and lead to these very serious complications. One of the problems for young people is that they are more susceptible. Late teens, early 20s, as well as babies, in fact, they are the most susceptible to meningitis. And the problem with universities is you've got people who are maybe away from home for the first time, they're socializing a lot, they're out a lot, and they might also be living in quite cramped conditions, either in halls of residence or in student flats. And that's when we see the spread of the infection. So you can get vaccinated for meningitis at various stages of your life. Now, babies are offered a variety of vaccines when they're very little, the first few weeks of life, right up until they were 1 or 2 years old. And then teenagers at school are also offered a vaccine against meningitis. But meningitis B, which is the one that accounts for about 80% of infections, that has only been offered to children, to babies, in the last decade. So today's teenagers won't be vaccinated against meningitis B. The easiest way to check whether you've been vaccinated against meningitis is to check your medical records. You can either do that online on the NHS app, or you can look at a thing called the Red Book, which your parents would have been given when you were a kid, and that lists all the vaccinations that you've had. If you look at your medical records and you discover you haven't actually had your meningitis vaccines, you can go and get them from your GP through the NHS. But meningitis B, now that's not currently available on the NHS. You can get it, though, if you go to private providers like high street providers or other providers of vaccines. So if you're at risk of coming down with meningitis, for example, you've been a close contact of someone who's currently ill with it, you might well be given antibiotics to ward off the infection. But if you do come down with it, then there are a number of treatments they can give you. That might include, for example, fluids. It might include an oxygen mask if you're very, very ill. But the key thing is to get help quickly, to seek medical attention, because it is an infection that can develop very, very quickly.